Has Nintendo finally lowered prices? So we finally got a release date and more info for Splatoon Raiders, and I think the most surprising thing is that it's going to be $50 digitally and $60 for the physical copy, and I was shocked by this. So we already knew that Nintendo was potentially lowering digital prices, like with Yoshi when they announced that. They announced it would be $60 for the digital copy, $70 physical. And there was a lot of talk about this, whether that meant that this was a $60 game they were charging an extra $10 for the physical copy for, or if it was a $70 game that they were charging $60 for digitally because it costs less to make, obviously being a digital copy. So we really still didn't know what the case was, but for this, with Splatoon Raiders being a $50 game digitally and $60 physically, I think Nintendo was finally leaning more into variable prices. And there's a couple reasons they could be going with this. One is that their games have just not been selling as well as they would have liked, and they realize that they're overcharging some games. Another could be that they are genuinely just lowering prices for digital games because it is cheaper to make and they make more money from it. That could be why, but it's most likely a mix of both if I had to guess. But I'm just very surprised by this because Nintendo games, or Nintendo Switch 2 games, have had a floor of $70. Before Yoshi was announced to be $60 digitally, every full, not kind of small titles Nintendo's made on Switch 2, like Dragon Drive or Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour, they've all been at least $70, with some being $80. And now we're getting two games that are going to be below that, coming out within a few months of each other. And Splatoon is not like a tiny series. Like, this is a game I was totally expecting them to charge $70 for, and maybe have it be like $60 digitally, $70 physically if they were going that route. And as someone who pretty much only buys physical games when it's available, if the prices were more, if they were $10 more for the physical copy, that would be really rough. And what I mean by that $10 more is that they're raising the price. Like, let's say a $70 digital game, they're raising it another $10 to make it $80 for physical copy, rather than making the digital copy cheaper and the physical copy the price it would have been. But I don't know if that's the case now. Now I'm starting to think that Nintendo might be moving in the right direction, at least in terms of the right direction for consumers, where games that should not be $70 are not being charged for $70. And I don't know how much content is in Splatoon Raiders. I think it looks fun. I've been a fan of Splatoon. It's not my favorite series, but a single player campaign is definitely something interesting for this. We've had single player modes, but this game is just built upon that. But I'm not ready to just say that we're giving the W to Nintendo yet, because this is two titles, and yes, they are bigger series. Like Yoshi and Splatoon are big series, but it's not their Marios, their Zeldas, Pokemon. Like, I really want to see what they do with that, because this could just be an example of they know these games are not going to sell as well as their bigger franchises, so they're making the price lower. And if we get, let's say we get a Zelda Ocarina of Time remake and they charge $80 digitally and $90 for the physical copy, then everything I'm saying in this video pretty much just gets erased, because I can't imagine they would ever charge $90 for that game. So that would just mean that they're artificially inflating the price and then artificially lowering it, like the digital copy, so they can make more money out of it. Honestly, if that game is $70 physically, $60 digitally, that would pretty much confirm to me that the digital prices have truly went down. But if it is $70 and $80, then I don't really think so. Same thing with Mario. So Mario Kart World already came out. It's been almost a year at this point. Besides the Switch 2 editions, the two Switch 2 editions that cost $80, we have not gotten an original Nintendo Switch 2 game from Nintendo that has cost $80, at least in the US. I don't know about other countries, but only Nintendo knows the true answer. It could have just been them testing the water, seeing all the backlash, maybe seeing sales of other games not be where they want, and then trying to correct that. But I really do hope that this variable pricing does continue. And someone might bring up Rhythm Heaven here, and that game is going to be $40, and it's a physical copy. I believe it's the same price digitally and physically. And something like that, like, they cannot charge $60 for Rhythm Heaven and have it sell, because it's a very niche Nintendo series. It's not even Splatoon or Yoshi. Like, it's very small compared to those. So that's kind of where variable pricing comes in. But at the same time, like something like Mario Tennis, like it is a tennis game. If it didn't have Mario attached to it, they would not be able to sell it for close to $70. So that could have just been the end of that pricing era where digital and physical is the same. But now it's on Nintendo to show us what they're going to do, because I think most people are understanding that physical games cost more than digital if the digital games are lower in price, because a lot of people already want digital games. A lot of people don't bother with physical copies anymore, and they're just going to be happy about the price cut. And for people like myself who pretty much exclusively buy physical games, I'm fine with paying the normal price for the game to get that physical copy, as long as it's like actually all on the cartridge. And Nintendo has not released a single game, and I mean Nintendo themselves, not Game Freak, I'll get to that. Nintendo themselves has, to their credit, released all their games as actual cartridges. They haven't done game key cards. Pokemon, Pokopia, that is a game key card. That's not a first party game technically. It's technically like a second party game. But hopefully this means that Nintendo themselves won't do game key cards. and by that I mean first-party games. For third-party developers, Nintendo does not control their prices. I highly doubt many of them are going to be following this pricing differential, especially since these games are on other platforms, so that would probably mean they would have to change it on there, and I don't think it's something that a lot of them are going to get into. And now we're going a little off topic. Everyone's favorite thing to talk about with the Nintendo Switch 2 is the sales, if the console is flopping, if the games are flopping. And I don't know how Nintendo feels internally about the sales. I don't know all their sales numbers. I have seen the Switch 2 on sale a lot, like on Woot specifically. Like if you follow Wario64 on X, Twitter, whatever you call it, you've probably seen that there's been a decent amount of sales, like $400 for it. I saw a Mario Kart World bundle for like $430, something like that. So I think that the sales have probably slowed down. I don't necessarily think that means that no one is buying it. I just think that it's a tough economy right now, and a lot of people don't want to make that jump from Switch 1 to Switch 2 yet. They just haven't had enough games to justify it to them. And that in turn would hurt the Nintendo Switch 2 game sales. Because unlike the original Switch where it was $300, you had Breath of the Wild from the get-go, you had Mario Odyssey that same year, and you could only play Nintendo Switch games on the Nintendo Switch. It's not like you could play your Wii U and Wii games on there. So a lot of people wanted to get this console because it was a new thing at the time, the hybrid. It was a good price. It had a couple of generational games, and people just wanted to get a Switch. Like the Switch is still being supported. It's not a new thing at this point. Like there's a lot of other hybrids now. The Switch 2 doesn't have too many games that you can't play if you don't have another console. Like if you wanted to play, let's say Resident Evil Requiem, chances are you have a PC, a PS5, or an Xbox and you can play it. So while it's cool to have it on Switch 2, I don't think many people are buying it for that reason. People might be buying it on Switch 2 if they already have it, but I don't think it's really a system seller. But I know people always say that we need a big 3D Mario, we need a 3D Zelda to sell Switch 2s. Some part of that is correct. Like, there's going to be plenty of people who already will buy a Switch 2, and I'm not saying that there's no games on the Switch 2, but those are Nintendo's big series. Those are games that will make people who were maybe on the fence about it, not sure if they wanted to get it, like, push them to buy the console. I've personally talked to people that are waiting for a new Mario, that are waiting for a new Zelda, and if you leave, like, this small, like, niche community online, where everyone is just knowledgeable on Nintendo, you're going to see that most of the people who have a Switch or people who are considering buying the Switch 2 are just casual Nintendo fans. They'll play Mario, they'll play Zelda, they'll play Pokemon, they'll play Smash, they might play Kirby, but they just haven't seen enough games that have made that purchase justifiable, especially in a rough economy. So to tie this all back into the topic of the video, I think variable pricing is happening for a few reasons. I think it's got to be at least somewhat because some sales numbers have not been where they want, whether it's because their games have just not been interesting to enough people, or because $70 is more money than people want to spend on some of these games, and Nintendo is realizing this, and maybe they want some goodwill, like saying, here, look, if you want this game cheaper, you can get it, but you can get it digitally, but if you want the physical copy, it's still the normal price, because there are plenty of people who still want to buy physical games, and if Nintendo decided to just raise those prices, there would be a lot more backlash. And I think this kind of makes a lot of people happy. If Nintendo is truly doing this variable pricing, if they're not raising physical game prices, because that way people who want physical games can probably still get it cheaper anyway. Like with the Yoshi, it's literally like $62 at Costco, so you're basically paying the same price for the physical copy anyway. And as long as they're not raising prices, and they're more willing to price games what they, I guess, really should be, even though that's subjective, like I can give Nintendo some credit for that. I've been very critical of them. I don't think this means that their pricing is automatically perfect or anything, but I think it's a step in the right direction. And once we start to see more games come out and we see the prices of those, I think we'll have a better idea of how it's going. But for now, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I think most people have probably already made up their minds in this. There's probably people calling me a fanboy, and probably going to be people calling me a shill for Nintendo. There's probably going to be people saying that I'm drifting for some reason. I say this in like every video. But as I like to say, you shouldn't have to be fully loyal or just hate Nintendo. Like, you can be more in the middle and not commit to either hating or loving something. And also, this doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with all the prices. Like, I still think that $60 for a Yoshi game is like a little much, so I'm not going to be getting it at launch. I don't think it's an absurd price or anything. I think that Tomodachi Life Living the Dream probably should have been more like $50, but I still think it's a very fun game. I think Rhythm Heaven Groove, that being $40, I'm not really a big Rhythm Heaven fan, but the fact that there's a physical copy of this means that I'm definitely going to look into getting it, especially since it's a cheaper game. And I would say we're going to have more answers soon, but really the only other game we know about coming out is like Fire Emblem. I don't even know if we know anything else for 2026 besides the games I already went over. And Fire Emblem is going to be an interesting one because it is a popular series, but it is more niche. If I had to guess, that's going to be $60 digitally, $70 physically, and I don't think there'd be too many complaints about that. But you know what, we'll just have to see. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments, and be sure to subscribe.